Oscar is back, baby. We missed him. Where has he been? I don't know, but he's back. They're teammates, but they're rivals. Could see the McLaren garage be disappointed. I didn't think it could get worse for him. Who is deciding this? They shot their drivers in the feet, whatever, you get me. Good for Lando, I guess. Sometimes what he says is like a little bit off-putting, you know? It's not over until it's over. Literally anything can happen. Welcome back to another F1 Yap race recap video. If you're new here, my name is Jess and I love to yap about Formula One as a self-proclaimed amateur enthusiast. I'm no expert, but I love to chat about what happened in the races and the current drivers' championship that's going on and just my thoughts as a girl who watches for the plot, basically. In my last video, I talked about the last 4 races and how we went from basically an Oscar-dominated leading championship to a Lando-dominant leading championship, and basically that it was kind of guaranteed for Lando to win, right? That's where we left off. Let me just say that things have changed. While Lando is still in the lead, there has been a lot that has happened this weekend to shake things up, shall I say. And without spoiling too much yet, the championship battle will be continuing in the next race in Abu Dhabi in the last race of the season, which is crazy. I'm going to get into that later in the video, but for now, we're going to chat all things the Qatar Grand Prix race sprint weekend. And because it was a sprint weekend, first we're going to cover sprint qualifying and then the sprint, and then we're going to cover main qualifying and the actual race. And then I'm going to talk about the current drivers' championship standings, and then at the end we're going to wrap up talking about what this means for next weekend, the final race of the season. So it's going to be a big one. Buckle up and let's get into it. Starting with sprint qualifying, all I have to say is Oscar is back. Oscar is back, baby. We missed him. Where has he been? I don't know, but he's back. He's back. He pulled out fantastic sprint qualifying and it was gorgeous. It was the Oscar that we know and love. Interestingly, when Oscar did get pole position in sprint qualifying, the camera crew, TV crew brought it back to the McLaren garage and everyone in there looked disappointed. I think that they were showing Lando's garage, but it is interesting that there was not like a little bit of excitement. I don't know, it's like crazy rivalry in the McLaren team. I did talk about this in, maybe it was my Singapore, I don't know which race recap, I'll try and find it and link it, but I did talk about how it is so interesting that they're teammates but they're rivals, and that was really, really prominent when Oscar got pole because you could see the McLaren garage be disappointed. It was crazy. People are appalled, and I think people might be taking it out of context because, I don't know, was it Lando's garage? I couldn't tell you, to be honest, but seemed like Lando's garage. So yeah. Anyway, interesting, that team rivalry. But our results for qualifying was Oscar, George, and then Lando, and then Alonso, Yuki, and then Max in 6th. One of the reasons Lando qualified in 3rd was because he did his final fast lap of qualifying behind Albon. He didn't really get like a great track position, and apparently he was stuck in the dirty air of Albon, and that slowed him down. I don't know if he would have pulled out a better lap if he had better track position, but that does play such a big part in qualifying because qualifying isn't just who can do the fastest lap, it's who can do the fastest lap and put it together in all the different sectors, avoid being affected by any yellow flags, which is just luck, have a good track position, which is kind of strategy, kind of luck, and also get out when the track evolution is the best. So it's not just who's the best driver, there's a lot of things to put together, but who knows if that is really what affected Lando, but yeah, he came out 3rd. Also important to touch on the fact that Yuki out-qualified Max. That may be the first time this season, I don't know, but crazy. He's been so far down past Max this whole season, so to see him qualify better than Max was pretty exciting and good for him. Probably a good, bit of confidence, especially after in his recent interview, if you didn't know, they asked Yuki and they asked Isaac if they respectively knew if they were driving next season and who they'd be driving for. Isaac had a big grin on his face and said, I'll be on the grid next season. And Yuki kind of looked sad and he said essentially that he can't say anything, but people probably already know, which basically means he's kind of just told us he's not going to be on the grid next season. Isaac is probably going to be racing for Red Bull next year, so that's pretty exciting for him. I hope that they don't have a really bad car and mess up his career because I really like Isaac, but maybe he can actually, handle the Red Bull car, so we'll see how that pans out. But yeah, Yuki qualifying above Max was pretty cool. And the only other notable thing about qualifying for the sprint was that Lewis got knocked out in Q1. For a 7-time world champion, that is crazy. How is he having the worst season ever. He is having such a terrible season. I do feel for him. I think they asked him after, like, how was the car to drive, you know? And he just said same as always. And he's just so, he doesn't have much to say about it in media anymore. He's just, like, someone asked him as well, like, what are you looking forward to in the race or something? And he said the weather's good. So he's not enjoying his car. He's not enjoying his time at Ferrari. And yeah, it's crazy because I didn't think it could get worse for him after Mercedes, but it is gotten worse indeed. Yes. Okay, so qualifying for the sprint, Oscar's back on top. Now we jump to the race, to the sprint race, right? All in all, the sprint race is pretty boring and straightforward. Not that much happens. Our results was Oscar starting first, finishing first. George starting second, finishing second. Lando starting third, finishing third. Max starting sixth, but finishing fourth. And then Kimi came fifth and Yuki came sixth. So Yuki lost some positions, Max gained some positions. Essentially, Yuki lost positions because he exceeded track limits 4 times, which gave him a 5-second penalty. If you didn't know, you have to keep at least one part of one wheel in the track, like in the white lines of the racetrack. And if your whole car goes over that white line and there's not a little bit of it in the racing track, then you get like a exceeding track limits strike. And if you exceed track limits 3 times, on the 3rd time you get a warning, and on the 4th time or any times after that you get a 5-second penalty, because essentially when you're racing you're supposed to stay on the racing line, and if you go off the racing line and out of the track then you can gain an advantage and stuff. You need to stay on the racetrack when you're racing. So it seemed like a kind of an avoidable mistake, and it was a shame because he qualified so good, but he still finished good. 6 is still okay. The Ferraris finished 13th and 17th, which is appalling, and I would not want to be a Ferrari fan right now. So yeah, I don't know what's going on with them, but maybe next season they will sort it out, because they need to sort it out, because it's not where the Ferrari should be, if you know what I mean. The only other thing I want to touch on from the sprint was that at the end in the interviews, when they were talking to Lando, the interviewer asked him if he felt pressure from Max behind catching him, of needing to defend against Max, and Lando had the most peculiar and weird response. He said, no, I only look forward, so I didn't see Max, which is one, inaccurate. No racing driver doesn't know what's going on behind them. Like, that is a key part of racing, knowing who's behind you and staying in front of them. If you don't know who's behind you and that there's a threat behind you, that just makes me think you're like not doing a good job. And I know that he would have known Max was behind him. Like, that's obvious. Like, because his team would have told him, he would have looked in his mirrors. Like, there's no way that he didn't know. But this is the thing that rubs so many people the wrong way about Lando. Like, he's fine and people seem to like him, and then he just comes out with the weirdest things. Sometimes what he says is like a little bit off-putting, you know? It's like he's trying to be indifferent and be like, I don't care. But it comes across like, I don't know, I just don't like it. It comes across icky to me. I do like Lando, like, don't get me wrong, but I think sometimes the emotions are a lot for him maybe, and he doesn't want to talk, and he makes it very obvious that he doesn't want to talk. So I don't know, weird response. Anyway, let's move on to the race, shall we? So first we have qualifying, and it was actually really exciting. Oscar came out first, was on pole. It was great. He pulled out an amazing lap. He got a lap record actually, and he just put it together, delivered. He's just been having a phenomenal weekend, the whole weekend, and then he comes out and gets another pole position. And I was so nervous because who gets pole position actually makes a big difference in this race, because it's generally a pretty boring race and not that much happens. Pole position was really important, especially because McLaren has 2 number 1 drivers and they're both still in the championship. What should happen is that whoever qualifies first gets treated with priority for pits and things like that and strategy, and so they're at a better position generally. I mean, subtle foreshadowing, this race was an absolute shit show, but generally that's what happened. So when we were watching qualifying, we really wanted Oscar to get pole position because that is really important for him, and finishing above Lando was also very important for his championship battle, because while it's a slim chance for him to win at this point, it's not over until it's over. Literally anything can happen. I did see that there was apparently an interview that Oscar did where he said that the McLaren team asked him to support Lando and help him win the championship this weekend, and he said, absolutely not. I'm going to race like I could win because I could win, and that it was a very brief and short conversation. I haven't seen the interview, but I heard that that's what happened, and if that's true, that is absolutely crazy. Are you serious? Are you seriously going to ask a driver still in the battle for the championship championship to just not. I don't know. If that's true, that's absolutely crazy. And that also makes me lose respect for McLaren again. What are you doing? Who is deciding this? I know it's not everybody at McLaren, but there is someone in there really making questionable decisions. Anyway, qualifying results, Oscar's in first, Lando's starting second, and Max is starting third, which is crazy because these are all the drivers that are in the championship battle still. And they're 1, 2, 3. So we're like, is the first corner of the race going to be crazy? Probably. There was a little bit of drama with Lando in Q3. He didn't actually get to put in his final flying lap for the session. It sort of looked like to me that he started his flying lap and he kind of messed up in turn 2 and lost too much time to set a good enough lap. So he aborted that and tried to get back to the start line before the session ended, but he didn't make it. So then he didn't get to put in a final flying lap. But then in the interviews after, there's a clip that I saw online of George Russell saying to Lando, hey, why did you tell the media people that it was my fault that your lap was messed up? And Lando said, I didn't tell them that. And he said, well, who are you going to believe, me or the media people that are just trying to start drama? And they do that. They ask questions to try and start drama because that's interesting and blah, blah, blah. It is annoying though. Don't lie or don't insinuate. But then George said, yeah, that was annoying because I tried to give you a slipstream to help you in the championship. We know what team George is on. He's on team Lando, I guess. There was also talk between Lando and his team about Max on his lap and that Max got out of the way for everyone else but didn't for him. So I don't know what actually happened, but it seems like maybe Max kind of didn't get out of the way and sort of not impeded, but like kind of made Lando's lap a little bit harder or a little bit trickier, and that affected Lando's lap and ability to get a fast lap. And I wouldn't put it past Max to do that. Regardless, Lando got second, not first. The only other thing that happened in qualifying that we need to talk about is that Lewis was out in Q1 again, P18, starting in 18th on the grid. That is crazy. I didn't think his weekend could get any worse, but it did. Ugh, the poor Lewis fans. Like, I like Lewis, obviously. I'm not like a diehard Lewis fan, but if I was, I would be devastated. Oh my goodness. It should not be like this. I don't know, why isn't he performing? But anyway, that's a discussion for another time. Now we get on to the race. This is where it starts to get really, really juicy. So far, it's been a pretty straightforward weekend in Oscar's favor, and this is where the tides turn. So naturally, I'm sitting there watching the race, extremely nervous for the first corner because we have Oscar, Lando, and then Max all racing to try and get position, keep position. And we have Max who has nothing to lose, Oscar who has a bit to lose, and Lando who has everything to lose. So at this point, I should mention, coming into this weekend, if Lando finished in the top 3 in the sprint, the race, and in Abu Dhabi, he wins. Regardless of how good Oscar does or how good Max does, he will win because of the points, no matter what. So he just needs to finish top 3. He doesn't even need to finish first, right? And he's finished third in the sprint. So he's already got his top 3 in the sprint. So now he's just trying to get another top 3. And he's trying to avoid a DNF at all costs. He cannot afford to have a collision in the first corner and be out of the race and out of the points. Whereas Max, he'd probably put it all on the line to get in front of Lando. So we're nervous for the first corner. So the lights go out, the race starts, and it's a clean corner. You know, it's all good. Max does get around Lando. So then it's Oscar, Max, Lando, everybody else. I thought this was going to be a really boring race, and I was hoping it would be a pretty boring race and Oscar could finish first, but it wasn't, because on lap 7, Hulkenberg and Gasly had a collision, which meant there was a safety car. And this is where everything turns. So because of the race conditions in Qatar, the strategy was pretty strict. They didn't have much wiggle room for their tires. They basically got to do a 25 lap stint, a 25 lap stint, and a 7 lap stint. So for most drivers, they put on mediums to do a medium 25 lap stint, another medium 25 lap stint, and then a 7 lap soft stint at the end. That was kind of the strategy going into it, or a very common one. Some people started on the softs, but essentially it was 25, 25, 7. They had to do 2 stops and they couldn't exceed 25 laps because the tire degradation was too high. Well, because there was a crash on lap 7, this was a perfect pit window for everybody, because it's like, well, then we can just do our last 2 25 stints, get our 7 lap stint done, and pit under the safety car, because when you pit under the safety car in Qatar, you have a 10-second benefit in time saved for pitting under the safety car. So essentially it was like a 25-second pit stop in general, or it was a 15-second-ish pit window. So it was very, very advantageous to pit then, and it was easy for every single driver to pit because they all needed to pit after 7 laps. The only difference was that if you were on the mediums and you pitted after lap 7, it meant that you didn't get a stint on the soft tires. Essentially, you'd have to do medium, hard. Not a big deal. So you'd be right if you were thinking, hey, I guess they all pitted and they all almost all pitted except the McLarens. I don't know why they didn't pit. It was very annoying and they just decided to keep them out. There was talk that potentially they were trying to pit at the end of that lap before they caught the safety car, but they caught the safety car too early. And then because they caught the safety car, they'd lost the time and they'd lost their advantage to pit under the safety car, because then all the other cars would catch up and then they would lose track position. Everyone else pitted and they didn't. This basically messed up Oscar's entire race and Lando's. Essentially what happened after this was the McLarens were told that because they didn't pit, they had more flexibility and they could, maybe have a benefit of a later safety car or still run the softs, or basically they were saying, well, every other car lost its advantage because they have to pit on lap 32, but the McLarens can pit a bit more flexibly. This was kind of a silly thing to say because they still really only got 25 laps out of every tire, so the strategy was exactly the same anyway, and the race settled down and there was no more safety cars. They shot their drivers in the feet, whatever, you get me. Oscar and Lando played a huge catch-up game. First, they had to race really, really hard on the tires that they had to make a big enough gap so that when they did their first pit stop, they weren't pitted into the DRS train, which they both achieved. Lando, by a hair, he was so close to being stuck in that DRS train and being behind Alonso, but he came out in front. So I am glad, because I never want to see a driver lose a race because of a bad pit stop, or to lose track position and really affect them because of a bad pit stop, because it's just so annoying, it's not their fault and it's frustrating. On their fresher tires, they needed to catch up to and overtake Kimi and Carlos, and ideally Max, but at least Kimi and Carlos. So Oscar did, he got around him pretty easy. He did a great overtake on Kimi, he's home and hosed. And then he gets enough in front of Carlos that for the second pit, he could come back out in front of him. That's good at least. He's in second and he's comfortably in second. Lando was pushing it a bit more because he couldn't really get around Kimi and Carlos, and it sort of seemed like he was going to finish fifth, right? But then at the end, Kimi let him pass. I don't know. Are the Mercedes supporting Lando? Unsure. But it seems like Kimi just moved out of the way and let Lando through on the last lap, or the second last lap. I didn't really see what happened, but that's what the consensus online seems to be, that Kimi just let him through. So good for Lando, I guess. But Oscar could not catch Max or overtake Max. So because the Red Bull engineers did the reasonable and smart thing and the McLaren team just messed up, Max got a win. And this changed things so dramatically. So it was basically exactly what Max said in one of his most recent interviews. Someone asked, such a great comeback in the Drivers' Championship, and he basically said, well, it's not really my achievement or Red Bull's achievement, it's more that McLaren have just been making so many mistakes that I just get to benefit. Like, it's not that I'm doing so well, it's that they're doing so bad in their strategy and team management. And that is exactly what happened. He benefited off McLaren just being absolute clowns and completely messing up the strategy for both their drivers. And it bothers me so much because it's basically that McLaren is trying to treat Lando and Oscar exactly the same, and in doing that, it's disadvantaging both of them. And I think that there is a bias towards Lando, and it seems to be there's a bias towards Lando. Zach Brown clearly likes Lando better. It's just, it feels like everything has been stacked against Oscar, and he had this chance to get back and have a real competitive chance against Lando in the Drivers' Championship, which he has just as much of a right to, and the team just didn't prioritize him. And the way that McLaren rules have worked, it should really be that whoever is on pole and whoever is coming first, they should be prioritized in that race. It needs to be race to race. The championship should not be a factor, but it is. And I think personally what happened is they didn't pit Oscar and Lando because double stacking them would have been to the detriment of Lando, because it would have held him up and then he could have come out further down the pack, which is what happened in that pit stop, that first pit window, because everyone pitted. It was carnage, and someone almost hit a mechanic, and it was just everywhere, and race positions were compromised a little bit. And I think that they didn't pit the two McLarens because they wanted to keep the McLaren strategy the same, and they couldn't have double stacked them without having Lando at a disadvantage. And that is not how it should be, because basically this whole pit stop kerfuffle is why Oscar came second and not first, and those points were vital, because the difference between first and second has a huge point difference compared to the difference between second and third. It's like 25 to 18 and 18 to 15, I think. It also meant that Max overtook Oscar in the Drivers' Championships. Now Oscar's coming third in the Drivers' Championship, which is absolutely baffling and should not have been possible. And if McLaren weren't being such clowns, it wouldn't be a reality, but it is. It was actually heartbreaking to watch, because Oscar, it's like he was penalized even though he was having such a great weekend. It bothers me. It bothers me so much. If you can't tell, I am angry about it and upset about it. And everyone is. The whole internet, or at least my side of the internet. Everyone is furious and baffled by McLaren's behavior. Where does that leave us? Basically, the championship battle is continuing in the next race in Abu Dhabi next weekend. And I've got to say, it is really exciting for a championship battle to go to the last race. I would have been very disappointed if Lando won the championship this weekend, because next weekend would have been less exciting. So it is really cool to have not only the championship being undecided in the final race, but to have 3 drivers in contention. The last time that there was 3 drivers in contention for the drivers championship was in 2010, and there was 4 drivers that could have won it in 2010. So to have 3 drivers who could win next week is really exciting, and it keeps, the season really engaging, especially since McLaren won the Constructors' Championship so early on. But I think that McLaren absolutely did a disservice to Oscar, because if Oscar had have won, there would have been a much more reasonable chance that he could win the Drivers' Championship next week. But he didn't win. So while he could still win the championship, the odds are definitely stacked against him now. So basically, as it stands, Lando's still in the lead, and then it's Max, and then it's Oscar. And if Oscar comes first in the Abu Dhabi race, he could still win the championship. If Max comes second, it doesn't really matter where Max comes, but Lando has to finish P6 or worse, lower, P6, P7, P8, anything below P6. He can't finish P5 or above. Even if Oscar wins, Lando will still have more points and win the Drivers' Championship. And if Max comes first and Lando finishes out of the top 3, then Max will win the championship. So that's where I wanted Oscar to be, and that's where he should have been, because he deserved it, and McLaren just absolutely messed him and his race up. It's disappointing, because I think you could see in the interviews and everything that he knew he was so close, and it was such a long shot, but then everything worked out for him, and in them trying to preserve Lando's chance as well as his own, they messed his only chance up basically. And the chances of Lando finishing P6 or worse is a lot more far-fetched than Lando finishing P4 or worse. At least it wasn't decided in Qatar who won, and I'm going to be excited to watch the final race, but I'm not going to have my hopes up for Oscar, unfortunately. We still don't know who will win. There could be DNFs, there could be crashes, there could be car failures, or anything could happen. We don't know what's going to happen in qualifying, but I am really excited to watch the last race. F1 is nothing if not unpredictable at times, and it's been such an enjoyable season and such an engaging season, and I do love the fact that it hasn't just been super predictable, it's been actually extremely unpredictable, and having a championship battle between 2 teammates is so exciting, and it just makes the stakes so high. I like Oscar and I like Lando, and I also really like Max, so no matter who wins, it will still be a great result. The only other thing is Carlos finished 3rd, which is crazy. To see Williams on the podium and the Ferraris, I don't even know where they were, 8th and 12th, is crazy. Lewis obviously made up a lot of positions, but still, it's not where you expect a Williams versus a Ferrari to be, and it is very iconic that Carlos got kicked out of Ferrari for Lewis, and he's been on the podium twice this season, and Lewis has had the worst season of his whole career. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I love having an F1 yap. This season is crazy. There is not a lack of things to talk about, and I can't wait to watch the final race and give you my final race debrief thoughts. I will catch you in the next one.